friends, welcome back to my channel, TeaBooksAndTazmyn. I am Tasmin May. Today I am drinking green tea in my anthropology mug, I think. And as I've been away from YouTube for a couple of years, I thought I would do a little recap of the best books that I've read since I was last here. I'm gonna go to Goodreads and tell you about the ones that changed me. I've read so few books this year, it is abysmal. Okay, I've gone back to the beginning of 2021. The first book that I read that year that I was like, this is exceptional, was Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire. I immediately read book 2 called Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and I didn't like the second one as much as the first one, but actually in hindsight, the second one is the one that has stuck in my head so much. This is a very famous series, but for those of you that don't know, I don't know if this has necessarily done the rounds recently. It was very popular pre-COVID, very beginning of COVID. So for anyone that's new to like the book internet, book 1, Every Heart a Doorway, follows a boarding school for young people who have been whisked off to portal fantasy worlds. Think the rabbit hole that leads to Wonderland. Think the cupboard. Think the wardrobe that leads to Narnia. It follows a young girl who is going there for the first time. But this world is very much like our world, and so the girls that are being sent there, I think it's all girls, they're very much being sent there in a kind of like, there's something wrong with my kid, their mental health is like messed up, they think they went off to this magical place, and the headmistress is like, I have experience on like helping fix people like this. Come here, bring her here and we'll cure her mental disorder. But the headmistress is like, yeah, no, I've spent my entire life trying to get back to my portal world. So it's this community, the school, where they essentially go through therapy together and try to help each other find the portals back to their own magical worlds. This makes it sound almost like cute and cozy. It's not at all. It's very atmospheric, adult fantasy. Oh, and I think there's murders in the first book. Yeah, murders suddenly start happening and they're all like, oh, no. And so the premise for book 1 is a murder mystery set in this incredible, fantastical setting. I say that the school itself is normal, it's just got people in it who have been to fantastical places in the past. Then book 2, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the series going forward, are actually stories of the individual characters who we've previously met going back to their portal worlds, or almost being like a prequel in a way, telling us about when they were previously in their portal worlds. The second book follows Jack and Jill, who are twins, 2 girls, and they've very much been raised being the boy and the girl, and their portal world is almost like a vampire. It's inspired by Dracula, I think. And one of the sisters, I can't remember which way around they are, one of the sisters wants to become like the wife of the vampire, and then the other one becomes the mad scientist in town's assistant, and there's a sapphic romance in there as well. The setting of it and the feeling that that second book evokes in me, that's never left me. Maybe if I were to read it again, I'd rate them the other way around. I don't know. At the moment, when I read them first, it was book 1 was 5 stars, book 2 was 4 stars. Then my next 5-star was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which I actually just mentioned in a TikTok. That book is one of the best books that I've read, just full stop. It's based on a real historical event. It's set in 1918 in Dublin and takes place in a maternity ward over 4 days. But plot twist, it's not just like people giving birth. There's like a plague going on. It was a real pandemic. Lo and behold, 100 years later, when this book came out to commemorate the plague that happened 100 years ago, we're having our own plague again. It takes place on this maternity ward specifically for people who are giving birth, like in active labor, and have the plague. They don't call it a plague, do they? What do they call it? It's called the Great Flu. Oh, it spans 3 days rather, and it's also sapphic. That's all I'm gonna tell you plot-wise, because it's so character-driven, and the detail that goes into the medical complications of all of these people giving birth. There are like 2 or 3 beds in this room as well, and there is a turnover, so we maybe get like 4 or 5 patients throughout the whole book, and each character is written in such an incredible, distinctive way. I can't recommend it enough. I can't. Funnily enough, a year or so later, I then read Haven, which was Emma Donoghue's next book, and I didn't like it at all. But I have her newest book, Learned by Heart, and I'm hoping to get to that one soon. And it's about Anne Lister. and it's all about like the lesbians and stuff. No, I read The Midnight Library and hated it. Then I reread all of the Tokyo Mew Mew mangas. Ah, the joy that they brought me. The next book I gave 5 stars to was The Heiress by Molly Greeley, which is a Pride and Prejudice retelling from the perspective of Anne de Bourgh, so Catherine de Bourgh's daughter. The hot take in this one is, what's the Laudum or something? Laudanum. Yeah. Okay, so laudanum was a medicine that is it's opiates. The take on Pride and Prejudice in this version is that Anne was given laudanum a lot as a baby, as a toddler, because they just didn't want her crying, you know, acting like an actual human being child. And so she became addicted to it. She was sick because she was literally addicted to opium. It spans her entire life. We follow her through her entire childhood, through the events of Pride and Prejudice, and then out the other side. And also, she's gay. I'm gonna put vibe spoilers here on the screen. I'm gonna tell you now if it's like a happy or a sad gay story. Do you still want to know? Okay, it's a happy gay story. If you want happy, sapphic, historical romance joy, this is the one. This is the one! The next one that I read was Severance by Ling Ma, which is in my top 5, like, probably of all time. And I only gave it 4 stars immediately after reading it, which is insane because I recommend this book to everyone that will fucking listen to me. I read it coming out of first lockdown, and it terrified me because it's essentially a zombie apocalypse following a plague, a pandemic that was exactly like COVID, right down to like the type of face masks that we had to wear and where in China it originated from and how it spread around the world by shipping things out from factories. It was so insanely scary. My friend Emma, who works at Book Break, Pam Mac, you might remember her from Drinking by My Shelf, she read it just as we went into lockdown in the UK, and I can't imagine the kind of like crisis she would have gone into, because I was freaked out reading it knowing that there was hope on the other side, but she fully was like, well, we're all gonna turn into zombies and die. We're following one woman and she finds a group of people in the light trying to survive, but it bounces back and forth to her childhood when she and her parents emigrated over from China, her remembering China, and then her work in New York and the rise of the pandemic. This one is a very, very short book as well. I recommend it so much. Absolutely incredible. I then read a couple of like horsey kid books, which I'm not gonna talk much about, but I enjoyed them so much. Mystic and the Midnight Ride, book 1 in the Pony Club Secret series by Stacey Gregg, and then Word on the Yard, book 1 in the Pony Whisperer series by Janet Rising. Ah, I love them. I love rereading horse books from my childhood. The next 5-star book was Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. I just bought her latest book called The Schoolhouse. I'm very, very excited about it. Love and Other Thought Experiments is such a weird one to try and explain. I'd say it's a collection of intertwining short stories, and each short story is based off of a famous thought experiment, and they weave and interconnect in a kind of like alternate reality, parallel universe way. It's sapphic, because everything I read is, apparently. It's a wackier one. If you don't like kind of experimental writing, keep away. You will not enjoy this. It's fantastical. Like the first thought experiment, one of the lesbian couple has an ant stuck behind her eye, and everyone is like, no you don't, no you don't. And she's like, no, I do. I know that there is an ant living at the back of my eye in my eye socket. And then one of the later thought experiments, if I remember correctly, actually follows the perspective of the ant. It's amazing. It's about lesbian parenthood. It's about queer found family. It's about not quite so fun parental relationships. It's spectacular. And I'm so eager to start her next one. Next book I want to do like a little sneaky shout out to is Bravely by Maggie Stiefvater. This was such a fun read. It's a sequel to Brave, Disney Pixar's Brave, and I loved it. I haven't read anything else by Maggie Stiefvater before, and after this I don't know if I necessarily will, because the issues that I had with it were very much like from her storytelling perspective, and if it hadn't been the characters that I already love from Brave, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it that much. But because Brave is like my comfort film if I'm depressed, that is the one that I turn to. That is the one that will kind of give me hope that things are going to be okay. Not necessarily because of the the moral of the story, but because I literally imagine myself as Merida living in like medieval Scotland, galloping through the woods on my horse and firing arrows into the sunset. So yeah, I love that. If you like the movie Brave, I definitely recommend this book. The next 5-star is categorically my favorite book of all time now. It is The Dance Tree by Kieran Millward Hargrave, and she's actually now a really lovely friend of mine, which is insane. I got the arc and I started reading it, and I put on my story that I started reading it. My friend Katie Webber replied and was like, have you noticed that it's dedicated to me? And I was like, what? Because I read Kieran's first book, The Girl of Ink and Stars, when it came out when I was 16. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean you know her? Kieran saw my story about the book and she was like, oh, thank you for reading it. And I was like, I'm a friend of Katie Webber's, by the way. And then she followed me back and then we became friends, and I love her and she's so cool. I just love her. But so, The Dance Tree is a historical fiction with sapphic characters. We follow Lisbeth, who is experiencing her 13th pregnancy, and all the previous 12 have resulted in miscarriages. And while we follow her, there is this mysterious dancing play going on, which, if you're interested in researching it, is a legitimate thing that happened throughout history. The church is like, are they evil or is this a good thing? I can't tell. If you have religious trauma, this book is great. I don't feel like I'm being particularly coherent about this. It is just plain and simply the best book I've ever read. Ever. Then the next 5-star I gave was to Assassin's Apprentice, which is now officially my favourite fantasy series of all time. That is book 1 in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I say trilogy specifically because I have an entire shelf's worth of her books down here, and they are all set in the same world, but there are like little trilogies and quartets and things within them. So I started chronologically, and now I'm halfway through book 2, and I'm going to read all 27,000 of them. It might take me 27,000 years, but we will get there. So in book 1, we follow a young boy called Fitz. At the beginning of the book, I think he's like 6 years old, and he has been dumped at the castle by his grandfather. The grandfather's like, we've raised him for the first however many years of his life, we can't afford you now. He is the bastard son of the prince, so he is now your responsibility. Luckily for Fitz, he looks exactly like his father, so they believe him and he's taken in. And then we follow him in book 1 through to the age of maybe like 14 or so. And not to spoil anything, but as I said, it follows Fitz, and it's called The Assassin's Apprentice. It's a very slow-paced fantasy book. It's character-driven. If you like plotting over pantsing, then this might not be for you. All of my favourite books are character-driven, so that's important to know when listening to my recommendations. Also, Burek is the love of my life. Anytime he appears on the page, I just put like loads of love hearts and smiley faces around because oh, I love him. I love him. There must be other people that do. Because when I've said that to my other friends who've read the books, they're like, really? Burek? And I'm like, motherfucker. Maybe it's just because he's like the stable master and he's really good at looking after horses. Thinking about it now, that's probably why. A man who looks after horses is the only kind of man I would ever want, thank you. The next books I want to talk about are the Hat series by John Klassen. I Want My Hat Back is book 1 of this children's picture book series. I have read all 3 of the books in this series now. They are all fantastic. They've all made me piss myself laughing, gasp in shock. Jess and I now ritualistically read his new books together. I actually posted a TikTok of our reaction to reading his most recent one. I mean... oh, fuck me. Fuck! Oh! 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 Is that the end? I think it might be, yeah. It really is just that good. Book 1, I Want My Hat Back, follows a bear who has lost his hat. And he wants it back. He wants his hat back. Oh, then I read a few absolute bangers back to back. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is Red Memory, Living, Remembering and Forgetting China's Cultural Revolution by Tanya Branigan. I actually didn't finish it because it was so emotionally devastating for me because my family grew up during the Cultural Revolution. My mum was a kid, like a young kid, and literally grew up during it. And while I knew bits and bobs about it through just like hearing things from family, I didn't know much. And reading this book was harrowing. For people that don't know, it was a civil war that happened. It was like neighbor turning on neighbor, father turning on son. Well, it would be son turning on father. Absolutely horrendous. And this book is probably the most impactful book to me that I've ever read because it's changed the way that I see my mum. It has changed my relationship with her, and it's just changed my life. This book has absolutely changed my life. I read it because I interviewed her for Blackwell's in Oxford. Woo! And I'm so grateful to James for asking me to, because otherwise I might not have ever heard about this book. And as I said, changed my life. Next, I read Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. Oh my god, this is a memoir about an autistic woman who didn't find out that she had autism until she was an adult. It's a memoir going from her childhood through to, I think she's like maybe about 30 now. It's hilarious, but also so fucking depressing. She has to become a stripper while she's at uni, and it was actually the best job she's ever had. She literally was sent to like a mental institute in her teenage years. It talks about how horrifically ableist the world is, and talks about, obviously it's a memoir, her experiences of being at the butt end of said ableism from the greater world and also from her family. It's spectacular. If you're gonna read any memoir, make it this one. The Delore Ad by Missouri Williams was fucking weird, and I love it, and I think about it all the time. It is set in a sort of post-apocalyptic world, and everyone is dead except for a brother and sister, and they decide to repopulate the earth. The further down the generations they go, the more physical deformities they have, the more mental issues they have. It is violent, it is disgusting. There is incest on every single page, so you need to know that going into it. It is vile and uncomfortable and confusing. There's some stuff that's of the younger children watching a recording of a TV show from before the apocalypse happened. That kind of then blends in with their reality. So sometimes, at least from my perspective, when I was reading it, I was like, I can't wrap my head around whether or not this is actually on the TV, or if this is in the real world, or is it almost like a fantasy where it blends the two? Or is it from the perspective of a child who isn't able to tell the difference between the TV show and reality? It's just mind-boggling. It was filthy, it was debaucherous, and it is fantastic. I recommend it highly. Then I read another Pride and Prejudice retelling. I read The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. I specifically listened to the audiobook because I read physically very, very slowly. Like, I read at 1 speed. The book was so good I needed to get it in my brain quicker. I love audiobooks. I love them. So I was listening to this book on like 3 speed, which I know is normal for a lot of people, but I generally flip between like 2 to 2.5. 3 times. Absolutely necessary. I love it. I miss it. I want to reread it immediately. It's fat as well. This is a chonky book, and I devoured it in like 3 days. Anyway, what's this book about? So it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and it follows Mary, who is the middle Bennett sister, who has always been called like, she's like the nerdy one who likes reading and doesn't have any friends and doesn't know how to talk to people and plays the piano all the time and wears glasses, which is disgusting. And it shows that while Pride and Prejudice being mostly about Lizzie, we see the dad as being like charming and funny and hilarious, but maybe he was really nice to Lizzie but was horrific to his other children. It's so great. It's so great. It's so good. It goes through from their childhood through the events of Pride and Prejudice, although as it's from Mary's perspective, there's actually barely any of the actual contents of Pride and Prejudice in this book because she's not close with Lizzie, so why on earth would she really be involved with them? Then post Pride and Prejudice, she does go to stay with Lizzie and Darcy at some point, so you do get a little bit more of them. You do get a little bit more of your favourite babies. And then follows her through to, when does it end? It doesn't end with her death. It ends with Mary in a place that she deserves. Then I reread the first 3 books in the WayFAIR series by Becky Chambers. It's my favourite series of all time, my favourite sci-fi. I recommend The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet constantly. I listened to them on audio for the first time. Previously I read them all physically, and they're incredible, they're beautiful. There is 1 book left in the series and I kind of don't want to read it because I refuse to acknowledge that it's over. I literally read like 70 pages of it when it first came out, and then I was like, no, I can't face the truth. Book 1 follows a interspecies crew on a spaceship, and they are on a 2-year journey to do some space stuff that I won't go into because, like, you know, sci-fi. It's about their interpersonal relationships, about the different species getting on. It's very episodic, which I know some people don't necessarily like, but to me I like it because I feel like it reflects real life. Like, your life isn't one big arc. Your life has lots of different little bits going on. It analyzes humankind through the perspective of all of these different species. In my reread of these 3 books, they're companion books, by the way. So the second book follows 2 side characters in book 1, and then book 3 follows a family related to the captain of the crew in book 1 as well. Yeah, they're all character driven over plot, as per with me. And in my reread, all 3 of them made me cry at the end. Oh wow, I've not read much at all recently. The other final book then is the first book in the Seven Waters series by Juliet Marillier called The Daughter of the Forest. I am, I think, about a third of the way through the second book. Again, listening to this on Audible. They're chonky, they're really huge, and I like consuming chonky books via my ears. Thank you. Can't see my ears. Have I got really little ears? I was expected to go like that and to be able to see them. I've got tiny ears. This is a fantasy book inspired by Irish mythology. It is, again, very slow paced and character driven. Who would have thought? Trigger warnings for graphic sexual assault on the page. It's not pleasant. It's not gratuitous. I do feel like it serves a point in the story. It's a retelling of the Tale of the Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. We follow Saoirse, seven brothers, evil stepmom, turns the seven brothers into seven swans, and Saoirse needs to do something to break this curse. That's the bones of the story, and I'm not going to tell you anymore. It's important that I don't tell you more. Anyway, thank you so much for coming to this video. If you have made it to the end of the video, please comment a swan emoji for The Daughter of the Forest. What are the best books that you've read recently? Or, you know, of all time. And if now, as you know my taste a little bit better, you know that I like slow-paced books, character-driven books. Do you have any recommendations for me? If you do, please let me know. And I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.